And it was that spirit of can do. I mean, the old cliche of play hard, work hard, which we did. But my God, in a corporate culture, it felt like a small business.
Where agencies and private equity meet, it doesn't always go well. But I think there's no doubt about it. It's just been a brilliant story.
The other thing I love about our industry, it's a meritocracy. It's not about age. Entrepreneurs reporting into is a bit of a difficult thing.
Hello everyone, welcome to the latest episode of Entrepreneurs in the Wild. As with previous episodes, what we've been doing is talking to entrepreneurs and trying to shine a light on the idea of entrepreneurial spirit and why it is so important. And also asking the question, is there a little bit of the entrepreneur in all of us? Joining me on today's episode is somebody who I've known for a long time, Ian Priest. And Ian is currently the CEO of a charity called Onwards and Upwards, and he's going to talk to us about that a bit later on. And also, what we're going to be doing is shining a light on lots of different parts of Ian's journey over the last few years. But Ian, thank you so much for joining us. Do you want to just say a few words about yourself and the journey that you have been on?
Yeah, well, nice to see you again after all these years. And we do know each other really well because you were my first graduate recruit back at DMB&B, IMP. You somehow got through that process. So I'm very proud, actually. Not only that, as I know you through business, but playing rugby together. So Absolutely. I know you outside of work as well as inside of work. So yeah, it's great to catch up with you again. Yeah, so and thank you for inviting me on this. So entrepreneurialism has always been, I think, at the heart of who Ian Priest is. And I've sort of weirdly gone on a career that's had lots of 7-year itches. I don't know why, but I've sort of done various parts of my career, jobs that have lasted for 7 years. So I think I'm in my sixth, I think it is at the moment. And it started with, and you asked sort of the journey. I'm going to go right back, actually, as a kid, because I'll call it DNA. It's probably over pumped up, in terms of that real meaning of DNA. But I grew up in a family that had entrepreneurs around me. So my mother's side of the family was Hamleys, of Hamleys toy shops. And it was started in 1760 or something like that. And obviously on Regent Street now and around the world. And it went bust in the Great Depression of the 20s. My grandfather was in charge then. Anyway, he opened a shop in Croydon and my mum used to work. And I used to work there in the Easter and summer holidays. And so I learned about the ups and downs of a toy shop, right, and a retailer. My dad's side of the family never had a proper job, as he would say, and he was always in the construction business. And he had various companies. A couple of times went bust when I was a teenager at school, and some were successful. And then my uncles, all of them, for some reason, have been in family-run entrepreneurial businesses. So it must have rubbed off on me as a kid growing up about the ups and downs, the risks. So I remember when I started thinking about doing it myself, it was sort of natural risk. Yeah, you sort of know things can go wrong, and things can go well. So that would be my sort of overview of that, where I started, and a number of other 7-year itches, which I'll go through as we discuss.
It's so funny that you say that. I hadn't realised that about myself either, because my mum was a hairdresser, my dad was a mechanic, and they went on to set up a business in Buxton. They actually ran a hotel. I wonder if what you're describing around this sort of family setting has also affected me without me ever really realising it.
Absolutely.
So it's so interesting, that you say that. And also looking back on previous episodes of Entrepreneurs in the Wild, it's true for most of the people that have gone on to set up businesses.
So it is that nature nurture, because it must rub off on you. As you say, whether it was if I had an accountant and a doctor, as would I have probably, I don't know, probably not. It might be in my DNA but the nature nurture thing, I definitely learned from it and the experience of it. So where we met, well, before that actually, so I did a degree and I went for the old business studies, A-level, and then degree. But I like the idea of business studies, not only because what I said before was I learned business through my family, but it had a gap year, but they did it really cleverly in 2 6-month stints. They had 6 months in your second year and 6 months in your third year as work experience.
Yeah.
So this was the early 80s, 81, 82, I think it was. And the first job, you had to find them yourself. So it was quite difficult. And the first job I got was at Prudential Assurance Company in High Holborn, just down the road, as a pensions clerk.
Yeah.
God, it was an awful... It was such a boring job as part of a massive organisation. And you sort of learn, I was very grateful because I got some money as a student, but I learned a bit about, big corporates and you sort of go, that's not me. Yeah, clocking in, clocking out. It was all very, very rigid structure. And then the second 6 months was in the third year. So you're back to uni, then off you go again. And I was starting to look at that marketing term without really having a clue what it meant. And I managed to get a job at an agency called Tim Arnold and Associates.
Oh, yeah.
And as the kid, kid sort of, trainee account exec. And worked on with an Australian account manager. We worked on the launch of Castlemaine Forex. Right. Australians wouldn't give and it was Saatchi's line, but we were the below the line boys, and we did all the, all the sort of shelf wobblers and the packaging and all that and all the point of sale. And I loved the environment. I loved the sort of get up and go and solution orientated and ideas and all that and making it happen. So then I took a gap year and I went to Australia, and that account manager went back to Australia and he went, do you want a job while you're in Australia? So I got a job at another agency called Kevin Condon and Associates for 6 months. That helped me fund going around the world because Dad didn't have much money because he'd gone bust, so I had to do it myself. So again, that taught you about the value of money. And then so when I came back, I got a job at IMP with on my CV, I got 2 6-month stints at an agency. So they went, oh, you must know roughly what it's all about then. Didn't know, very roughly. But that's how it started. So that's how, when I met you, that was IMP. Some big influences there.
IMP's had a sort of profound effect on me, and obviously it's had a massive effect on the industry, I would say, in terms of the talent that it has produced and also the businesses that have kind of come as a result of, IMP.
Absolutely.
So I owe IMP a lot, and I owe you a lot for giving me my first shot at this.
You and Stewie. You were outstanding.
Me and
you
Stewie, yeah, we were in the same interviews, and I remember speaking to you, and I think it was Peter Warner.
That's right.
You interviewed me, and obviously you then put us through a process. It was a bit like Dragon's Den, but for youngsters, and we had a live brief. I think we did something. I think IMP then sold that into the client, and what we sold in to you guys then actually happened.
Absolutely. And it was literally incredible. Dragon's Den. It was an overnighter, wasn't it?
It was. Yeah.
So, no, and you stood out, you two. But no, on that, the influences of IMP, and I was just saying earlier, we had this thing called Yenom. So as an account manager, I was a senior account manager, you had to run your own, it was Yenom with money backwards. So not only did you have to do the work for the client, but you had to run your own book. So so invoices, what was coming in, what was going out to clients, and you had to make a profit each month. Now, which was very different to my brothers and sisters in DMB&B.
Yeah,
they were very, very much focused on TV ads and creativity. We slightly looked at them and go, oh, that's the sort of flashy side, isn't it? But so I would say I learned commerciality.
Yes.
Right, from IMP. And the people around me were loads of entrepreneurs who you looked at them and go, right, they went off and did their own agency. Yeah, you did the same. And it was that spirit of can-do, commerciality. Yeah. I mean, the old cliche of play hard, work hard, which we did. But my God, you learn in a corporate culture, it felt like a small business.
But I also remember though about you, because you were already on the board when I turned up, and you pioneered the graduate scheme. So I'd seen that it was about enabling other people, enabling young people, and looking for like the spirit and future proofing. And so I think you more than any within that sort of mix of really impressive people kind of understood about talent and looking out for the talent of tomorrow.
Talent isn't just the thing I love about our industry. It's a meritocracy. It's not about age. Yeah, and that overused word diversity, I love it. Right, I love the idea you're getting people. creatives from different sides of the UK, from different parts of the world, from maybe wrong side of the tracks, you know? Yeah, from the posh twat who went to, a public school, to the really intelligent planner, to the producer, to the geezer printer. And I love the diversity and that an idea is as good as the idea is not as good as the person it comes from. So that's why I love diversity of age and gender. And it was always, again, it's natural that IMP was 50-50. Which did help in terms of social things as well. But it was in this sort of age we are in now, we were doing it back then in the 80s. And it is. And that's, you were a testament to it. You went and started Iris, and you were what? How old were you? You started that?
27?
Yeah. And Farrell and that lot were doing this sort of thing at 26, 27. We made a director at 27.
Yeah.
So, and that's a responsibility. So I learned a lot from IMP. And then, of course, actually, 5 of us, was it 6 of us? 5 of us broke away from IMP to go, because that was we loved IMP, but we always, again, going back to our brothers in DMB&B, when you worked with them, there was a slight aloofness. Yeah? They were better in terms of traditional creativity. And you sort of looked at it and thought, well, they do that brilliantly, but very few accounts do we work together on it. And when I worked with Saatchi's on that Castlemaine Forex, that worked brilliantly of bringing us below the liners in. And so we all thought there's got to be a better way of doing it.
Yeah.
So we thought, could we start it? I said, this is Satterthwaite, so to keep it away from John Farrell, this one. Mark Piper, Adrian Coleman, Pete Warner, and Mark Fidders.
Yes.
Right? And we all sort of thought, should we start our own integrated, like you did with Iris? Have we got the credibility in advertising to do it? And we all thought, actually, we probably haven't. Yeah? So we thought, let's go round to various agencies in town and say, look, we are sort of leading edge below the line, guys. If you properly want to buy into integrated, merge. Let's do a merger. And to cut a long story short, Hal Henry, who were the sort of enfant terrible of the 90s, they went, definitely, we're up for that. So we 6 of us joined, and that I became a small shareholder in Hal Henry. So it wasn't just a job; it was that you got a partnership. Then I became MD, and I learned a lot from Hal Henry about. If I learned commerciality from IMP, I think I learned genuine creativity at Hal Henry, and lots of different sort of. They call themselves professional radicals. Radical ways of thinking, real independence. And some really bright people. There's a number of people who were entrepreneurial in mindset in an independent agency rather than a IMP, which is more of a corporate. So again, there was a genuine spirit and values, and so I learnt a lot from both of those 2 sets of people.
I wasn't aware of the sort of conspiracy and, and the process that led you to HHCL. But I too, when we were all very motivated by integration, and that really was the sort of essence of the Iris startup when we did our breakaway. But also, Hal Henry, a hugely aspirational kind of business and loads of exciting work. And then the other thing is, obviously, when there was a point in time when you decided to move on from Hal Henry because an opportunity had presented itself.
But again, it's like restless spirit in me, right? Without telling sort of
for legal reasons.
I could see certain things going slightly wrong. Right at the top. Right. So what happened was Chime bought Hal Henry. And I think Tim Bell and basically there was a slight breaking up of the 4 founding partners. And you could sort of see maybe, and this is 6 years in, funny enough, my 7-year itch. I thought, I wonder if it's time. I bet you I could do this now, right? So I was probably in my, early to mid-30s. I wonder if I could start my own agency. And I looked at 3 different options, actually. Doing it myself, so I approached, Adrian, him and I got on like a house on fire. Slightly different styles, but trusted him implicitly. And that's really important part of any business is, finding trust. But then you need to find complementary partners. Same values, but I want difference. So hence a planner, a creative who will just come at it, IMP was slightly the account man.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah,
absolutely.
coming up with the ideas, and Stuart and everyone made them look a lot better.
Yeah.
But I wanted someone who could really genuinely push us into, compliment. So that was one option. And so I was talking to Adrian, and I approached, through IPA Golf, funnily enough, Rooney and then Charles. But that was sort of bubbling under. And then I had this other idea to go, I'm going to take, I like risk. So I put myself out of my comfort zone. So I went to Rupert Howell and went, what about opening Hal Henry in another country? So it was only in London. And he went, yeah, we've been thinking about it. New York, we've thought about it. It's really difficult. We've learned so many agencies that found it difficult, like BBH found it difficult to start with. And I said, well, okay, what about a country like, Australia? A good heritage, smaller, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, to cut a long story short, I took myself off the payroll for 3 months, right? And I said, I'll go and do a feasibility study in Australia. I had a young kid, wife, a young kid. For 3 months, we went down to Sydney. They didn't pay for it. I paid for it. And we did a feasibility study on opening Hal Henry in Australia. And the third thing I was doing, I had this idea of doing a healthy McDonald's, which was going to be called Good For You. And I went to Branson.
Oh, really?
Right? And I put it to his number 2, thought it was a good idea. And then Branson was in the next room. And he said, well, do you want to show it to Richard now? And he was very much a concept. I hadn't done any of the business thinking. And my regret was I went, tell you what, I'll do it when I've worked through the numbers a bit more and lost the opportunity there. Yeah. But anyway, what happened was that the first one of those 3 options came about because Rooney, Charles, Adrian, we said, let's keep an eye out for potential new client. So if we're going to start an agency, do it on the back of a client. Being an entrepreneur, don't just start something and hope you get something. Yeah. Can you do it off the back of something? And don't nick a client. Yeah, in terms of from your existing agency, because that is short-termism. So it was Rooney, actually, that got the in, which is quite unusual. You always think it comes from an account man, that sort of thing. And Rooney got a call from the account director at WCRS, Will Harris, who'd moved across to BT Cellnet. And he went, struggling a bit with the existing agency, Rooney, can you come and freelance and help us on this launch of BT Cellnet with the German and Dutch and Irish equivalent? And Rooney rang me up. He goes, Pristy, you said keep an eye out for a client. We might have an in here. So I thought, well, that's a big one. I wasn't expecting that. Anyway, cut a very long story short, I came back from Australia. We pitched on it. And the first thing we did, we went to see Lambinaire and the design agency. Oh, yeah. And being below the line, you just go, let's not be arrogant, kids here. And they come up with this really good thought for O2. And we said, right, that's the brand. That's the look. Charles and Rooney had done orange. So we did really a blue-orange in some ways. We came up with a positioning and a look. And the other thing worked because he's an art director, being below the line trained, everything was brilliantly branded. And the client went, you've got it, that's it, you've done it. So they gave us the account and we started VCCP off the back of that. So yeah, that's how VCCP started. So again, that's my third itch. Yeah. And I learned a lot there about, well, one, complementary partners. Yeah. Yeah. 2, I think Hal Henry probably sold too late. So we actually did a business plan. Yeah. I mean, when I call it a business plan, it was 2 pages. Yeah. And it was very simple. And we said, let's do a 7-year plan. And 3, we said, let's make sure we give equity to about a dozen people we had in mind. So it was about, I think it's 30%, 25, 30% of we 4 owned it, we gave to the next tier. But did it in a way, because I know you did something even broader than that, but we did it just to make sure, rather than give it straight away, it was used, 1, to entice in, but over a period of time, they would get more, depending on hitting KPIs, so to speak. And that was something that I don't think Hal Henry did quite enough of. So I learned from that. So giving real skin in the game to people who really add value. Yeah. That's another big learning I learned from an entrepreneurial point of view. And the more, and your instinct actually is, you probably went maybe a bit too far. Yeah. but give more than you giving more, you
Yeah.
get more back.
Yeah.
And I'd say VCCP now #1 agency, still a load of, I'd say 8 of those people are still there, right? And you know, that's worked brilliantly. That's a real lesson I learned.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say that is such a massive part of being able to build a sustainable and scalable business in our category.
Yes.
Because, I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, we went too far. I mean, we were sort of like, I mean, it's because we were young, you know, we didn't really sort of understand what we were doing. It was a bit like a cooperative, really. And I think when we got to our kind of earn-out, I must have had 50 shareholders to feed. I mean, good in that there was a lot of value there to share, and some of that was quite meaningful. Obviously, over a long period of a company's life in our space, you know, some people have left, some people are no longer contributing the same way.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And this is why I think the way that you're framing your journey is really interesting, because it's like loads of chapters that are roughly 7 years in length. You know, Iris is like 25 years old, and I wish we'd kind of understood more about where things are going and the different phases that are involved. I think so. There's a sort of real learning for you, but I don't regret the principle. I don't regret the
principles.
I don't regret the sort of you know, sharing the business with people that are going to make a difference to it.
Because a lot of people in our industry tend to keep it.
Yes.
Yeah, the name's on the door. Do they actually give enough away? So, yeah. And don't forget, I was a bit older, so I probably did it in my mid-30s, and I learnt from the mistakes of others.
Yes.
Yes?
Fair enough.
And the other one was that 7-year thing. I know it's slightly pathetic, my 7-year itch, but we had this very funny analogy of, because BBH were the ones we looked up to the most, right, in terms of agencies. And don't forget, Rooney and Charles came from BBH, and they were what we called the Rolling Stones of the ad industry, because, you know, they in various decades they were incredibly strong.
Yeah.
80s, 90s, noughties. Yeah. Were they in 70s? I don't know. But anyway, but you go, and most agencies, or a lot of agencies, are in and out. Yeah. So we said, shall we try and take that? So the idea of, could you get they were around for about 6-7 years. Now they're doing a lot of things, but the idea of having a few #1 hits and then someone buy you to scale you up to the next stage. So still, it wasn't sort of go to the beach after 7 years. No, it was like phase 1, do it completely independently, try and find a good partner. And this is, I don't want to be derogatory to the big groups, but we got approached by a load of the big groups. We didn't want to be part of a big group. We wanted to find a complementary partner. So one, in terms of scale, so we weren't this tiny little cog in a massive, great machine. We wanted to get a company, and so Chime were perfect because they were PR. They were already a PLC, but they weren't much bigger than us, right? So they needed us as much as we needed them.
Yeah.
So, and then we sat on the board, right? So we weren't being told up there, we sat on the board, Adrian and I. So we were very much part of growing Chime as well as growing VCCP. Yeah. So they gave us the next level up of credibility. Then we could go more international.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we could go broader, PR. So that was a, you know, I'm not saying we did everything right. We didn't. But that was another learning, right, in terms of entrepreneurialism, finding the right partner, then to, rather than just be bought and off to the beach, go to your next phase. And look where VCCP is now.
Yeah.
And it's gone through the Providence stage. So it went, Chime got bought by private equity. Actually, that's when I left. Because that's when I felt it was going to, again, going back to me and DNA, I really loved the growing stage of VCCP.
Yeah.
When it became really big, Adrian was way better than me at the proper grown-up stuff. And I went, I want to go back to small again. Yeah, that entrepreneur in my parents, you know, that's what was, when I sort of looked at myself, that's when I got most excited and most sort of energy. So, yeah, so Providence, and now, you know, that's what 7 or 8 years ago. But each stage of that growth was pretty good for us at VCCP.
Yeah, there's quite a lot of stories of kind of where agencies and private equity meet. It doesn't always go well, but I think there's no doubt about it. It's just been a brilliant story, hasn't it, VCCP? What a great success. And some of it must be linked to like Adrian and your journey and the old IMP training and and that ability to sort of, be commercial and be trustworthy as well.
Absolutely. And the creative, that's why I say commercial creativity.
Yes.
IMP, Hal Henry,
Yes.
and then we brought that together at VCCP, really. And we did. It's incredible over the last 7, 8. In fact, they've done a lot better since I left. They've gone on to a sort of global stage. It was a very good positioning. But one of the key things we learned, this was Charles's idea, I have to say, was when we did our creds. So we launched O2, and we didn't do anything else for a year in the first year. So 02, 2nd of February 2002, we launched the first ad we did for O2. And we launched it, and then for a year didn't do anything else. You can imagine we did the below the line above, and we got involved in creating the O2. You can imagine we were pretty busy, and we were building a team up. But then clients sort of looked at it, and it won the IPA Gold effectiveness because it said it works, right? So not only does it look good, it's integrated and consistent. It's working against the shouty Vodafone or Carphone warehouses. It was all sort of quite serene, and it worked. And so we became known as other clients started coming to us, launches. So we sort of got known for launch. So we did ING Direct. Yeah, part of the big Dutch bank, but in the UK, the direct arm. Then we did Coke Zero for Coke. Compare the market. Yeah. So, and again, when you get involved, which I learned from Hal Henry, you're often involved right at the top with the chief exec and the board. Yeah, you're not just dealing with a marketing person who changes every 2 years. So you're right at the heart of the brand affecting the business and the commercial. So again, that's something else I learned from that, and that's partly to the success of VCCP, is having a lot of grown-up clients, and growing with them. And so we grew O2 and did all their sort of direct stuff, and we grew each account grew each time, which I know is what you've done at Iris as well. So that goes back to IMP, I think. Yeah.
But the thing around VCCP that I really admire is about speaking to like definite use cases. It's not just like a generic creds thing. It's like we're this, we do that. It's like you're pitching specifically to a client need.
Absolutely. Launch. And the other thing we did, sorry, I forgot to say, Charles's idea.
Yeah.
Right. In our creds, we shared it with the AAR original creds, and they went, they went, I think we tried to, we're the most creative, integrated, whatever we said. And he goes, everyone's sort of saying that. Although you're more believable because 2 of your guys come from below the line, 2 above the line. But Charles sort of said, why don't we do it on value, on our principles, rather than sort of, yes, everyone's sort of at the proposition of, creatively effective, creative, integrated work. We led with our 10 founding principles. And if you go onto the VCCP website now, that's what is on there. And that what it was a nod to clients to go, some of your frustrations of agencies, this lot don't seem to be like that. So we had even things like be on time, be unprecious, be responsible. There were a number of B's, and all of them had, and everyone was reviewed on them each year, as well as we actually reviewed our clients on it.
Very good.
And it was just that became, I think, culture, is at the heart of it. Like an Iris person, a VCCP person, there is a certain type, and that's kept the strength of it going forward. And that's what BBH, we learned from BBH. Yeah.
So when you felt it was time to move on from VCCP, you then moved back into sort of talent, wasn't it? And and Grace Blue, and was that your next move, right?
Yeah. Again, I did a sort of this will sound highfalutin, but I sort of go, what's mine? What do I do next? Where do I think I can add value, and what interests me and gets me up in the morning, gets me going? Entrepreneur, small businesses, and linked to that, one of them was talent. Right, and I love talent. Like, same as going back to culture, and you become quite paternal. You become fatherly figure. You're responsible, don't you, for your company and your people. So I love that talent side of things. So Grace Blue, Juliet Timms, who I knew really well. So going back to IMP, Alistair Timms, who we used to both work with, knew Juliet, and she ran Limbo, if you remember.
I
from
remember,
BBH, yeah. Anyway, so they ran with Gay Haynes and Jay Haynes. They had a recruitment firm, but they then saw the gap in the market for a executive search firm in the advertising space, i.e. leadership roles rather than just account directors or account managers and that's what Grace, and I saw, anyway, every year I had a chat with Juliet, and they sort of got to a certain stage and they went out of it, just went, well, why don't you come and join? Yeah. So I joined I was chief exec, but really chairman, to help them grow from a sort of a family-run type business to sort of more of it became more internet. So we took it more international.
Yeah.
We went from advertising agency solely into marketing directors, so brands and sports media and entertainment. And we grew it. And now so I've left there 7 years ago, weirdly. And we sold it to an AI firm because that's where that whole, LinkedIn and the whole AI and talent searching, there's a real logical fit. So it's an American AI firm that we helped set up. It's a bit cuckoo. The baby's at the mother, so to speak. But again, that was a cultural fit, very similar to Chime and VCCP. It's not a big corporate taking them over. It's two similar sized companies working together to complement.
Hopefully I remember this correctly, that you were also sort of involved in like trying to sort of recruit teams.
Yes.
So one of the things that I've always loved is like the idea of the acqui-hire.
Yes.
Or the acqui-hire. Aqua is probably incorrect, isn't it? And just finding a little collection of people, 1 or 2, 3, a team that are up for something and they're aligned, their values are, a little bit like you were describing, the successful startups that you've been part of. And so I've always loved that. And I seem to recall you getting into that from Grace Blue.
We did. So there were two things. One at Chime, I did something called Chime Ventures. Right, which I forgot to say. So then I worked across the sports division. But Chime Ventures was about starting startups.
Yes.
Because Chime didn't have the money to buy when it was going more and more digital. So we said, could we start them ourselves? So I like the idea as you start up. So acqui-hires is really a clever way of doing a startup. Yeah. So that's something that Grace Blue offered. They also did. We did an acquisition offering, which was slightly bigger than that.
Yeah.
Right. Where we helped, rather than represent the seller, we represented the buyer to help them find companies, but not from a financial reason. We let the financiers do that. From a fit point of view, because we said, going back to what I learned, don't just buy them and then they piss off at the end of their earn out. Find those companies that you can grow together. So we did it based on talent. So we did an offering. So we would search the market, like you search for an individual for a role. We used exactly the same methodology, but search for companies that they needed. But sometimes it would be, we'd work with a client. So I don't know, they were looking for the head of social, for an ad agency looking for a head of social. We'd say, well, you could do that, or you could actually buy social media agency and do it quicker, rather than start a department with the head of, or you could do it like a smaller version is an acqui-hire. Hit the 3 key roles you need, right? We could find them, and then you could build a business rather than pay a 6 times multiple for that one. Yeah. So that was often because you're dealing with the chief exec trying to help them grow. So you could just you could hire an individual, buy a company, or maybe buy a team.
Yeah, I love the idea of it. And obviously we have done that successfully over the years at Iris, because a lot of our business was organically driven up until the last few years, where we started to get into a sort of rhythm of acquiring as well.
Yeah.
But it was all about backing talent, finding talent. Sometimes the acqui-hire would be driven by just people we were just working with or collaborating with on certain projects, and then one thing led to another, and before you knew it, there was a team, and it I don't know, it was something that we understood. It didn't take a lot of time. It didn't feel that risky, and it just sort of sent the right signals, if you like, to our culture.
And as you say, risk is quite, so because sometimes you want to sort of try before you buy. So I often found partnerships didn't work brilliantly, but partnerships that led it, they could be a lead into something.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah. And when you, again, whenever you look at, you just got to look at talent about what's going to motivate them as well as what's going to work for you for the buyer. Yeah. And it's not rocket science.
No.
Yeah. You just work out, and you work out that sort of how is it going to work financially, but how's it going to work culturally? Yeah. How are you going to, entrepreneurs reporting into, it's always a bit of a difficult thing.
This is one of the things I'm starting to see is that with entrepreneurs, they're okay about risk. They're actually all right about failure as well. So for some people, failure lands really badly and it destroys their confidence. There is a sort of trait in most entrepreneurs around just keeping going. And it's like, whilst they're personality and passion led, that they are driven by this sort of resilience and this sort of this mental ability just to keep going, just keep going. Even when there are big setbacks, like you go bust or that didn't work out or whatever, they just seem to be able to ride that through.
And it's sort of, it's the opposite to arrogance somewhere. You sort of, you know it's coming. It is resilience, I suppose. Yeah, it's just go again. Right, we learnt from that one, move on.
Yeah.
But there will be winners out there. So it is a positivity. That's why you think finding the right partners, because if you get someone who's a downer, my God, you can really bugger something up, So you've got to find people with complementary skills, but sort of equality and consistency of values, and go for it. And because don't forget, sometimes I'd be probably a bit down on something, and Rooney would be massively up on something, or Charles would go, no, don't think that, think this. So that team, if you really trust each other. Know that you're going to have complementary skills as well as sort of mindsets at various times. So I think that is true of entrepreneurs. Yeah.
But I also think though that there's a dynamic between entrepreneurs and non-entrepreneurs that are attracted to entrepreneurs and want to be in a setting of entrepreneurial spirit.
Yes.
Because I was having this conversation with someone in private equity. And I was trying to say, can't everyone be an entrepreneur? And they were going, not really. And actually, we'd rather not, because there's a time and a place.
Yes.
And actually, a lot of businesses are enabled by people that are not that attracted to risk.
Yes.
And just do their jobs and all that. But they are attracted to an environment that is fair, exciting, changing, rewarding,
Absolutely.
makes them feel like they're doing the best work of their lives and all the rest of it. And I think within VCCP, you've cracked that because you've got a sort of core founding team. There's entrepreneurial spirit, there's fairness, but then there's a culture of development and competition and excitement through change and looking at new ideas.
No, same as ours. So I think, again, we've learned that over don't you learn it off others? So that's a big learning. Yeah, you take bits of others and mould it to yourself. So that's an important part of growing. So I do, Grace Blue just sold it in January, so I'm now doing a sort of more plural thing.
Yes.
Sort of working with, there's a small agency I'm working with as chairman of Dog, Cat and Mouse. And what is positioning, we're all ex-Hal Henry, all around late 50s, 60. So you sort of, how do you make a positive out of being old farts? Yeah. And what we're doing is, we're calling ourselves grown-ups for scale-ups. Right, so it's the idea is we're going to target not startups, but those companies who are probably going to spend maybe $500,000 to $1 million, right? Maybe the first time on TV, but we're making a benefit of the fact we've got experience, can do things quickly, faster, cheaper, better. But for scale-ups where a lot of agencies, there'll probably be too smaller budgets. So I'm sort of, again, that's an entrepreneurial thing and a proposition and team and all that sort of stuff. And I'm doing that in a small sports business and a packaging business. But the most interesting thing I'm doing at the moment, taking my sort of journey on, is working actually in a charity. And most charities, I should be careful what I say here, they can be, because they're sort of getting their funds through donations. They're sort of quite a begging bowl. They're sort of, they can be quite slow, right? Of course, I'm being massively generic because Red Nose and all those sort of things have done things with a lot of dynamism. But what this charity is about is got entrepreneurialism at the core. So it started by a chap called Steph Jones, Hal Henry creative that I used to work with, who ran Big Owls, started Big Owls, which was, again, I love Big Owls because it broke the model. It was a freelance model for advertising, and that's one of the things IPA president, I wanted to sort of adapt the model more because I always found it's a little bit too uncommercial, and I wanted to be more agile in a world that was evolving. And anyway, he was a mentor at Brixton Prison, a business mentor through his church, and he saw two things. One, inside prison, there's a real entrepreneurial spirit. There's a lot of bright talent in there. But secondly, what happened is he was helping them with their CVs and, I don't know, interviews and how to sort of go, how they thought about getting a job on the outside. But what happened, he kept seeing the same guys coming back in. And he said, "Oh, why are you back in?" Huh. And he goes, "Just couldn't get a job. You're just shunned as an ex-prisoner."
Yeah.
But would I have taken on an ex-prisoner? Probably not. Yeah. But so he said, right, I'm going to do something about it then. So he started this charity called Onwards and Upwards, and I've basically been the account man to join him as the sort of creative inspiration to make it all work. And we're launching businesses, the first of which is called XO Bikes. XO for ex-offender, but actually we're trying to make it extraordinary in terms of the journey they've been on. But it's a bike business. We're looking at the next one, which is probably going to be a barber or a gym business. Yeah. And there's a number of them, but they're all entrepreneurial businesses that will be, they're 100% owned by the charity. Any money they make, we'll make, so our XO Bikes goes into profit this month, goes back into the charity to fund the next thing. Yeah. And that's what I love about it. It's got that energy of a charity. And I love the fact it's a cause, which if you get, you're seeing the other side of life, gets to you here about giving these guys a second chance. It really sort of affects you. But it's also got this, is a cause and it's a commercial entrepreneurial venture, and it's got both of those things going. So so that's what I'm doing now, and seeing different, not white middle class, northern, southern, whatever. But these guys are, they've got lots of ideas, and if channeled in the right way. And then what we're trying to do is then persuade each industry we go into. So we're talking to Decathlon at the moment. We're talking to other bike shops, and they're going, "Oh, your mechanics are really good." And hold on, I wouldn't have thought about an ex-prisoner before, but you're doing them. Well, maybe, okay. So we're taking them on. So we're now what, 40? I think we're 44. We've trained. Yeah, and one's just gone back to prison, but the national offending rate is 48%. So I'm dealing with people and entrepreneurial things again. So that's what I'm learning, taking a lot of what I've learned and learning from them and doing something in that space. So journey's carrying on.
That is incredible. And so normally in the episodes, I sort of ask the guest about, what they would do differently, or what advice would they give their younger self. But in your case, it's like, if you look at your, everyone's a zinger, you know what I mean? No wrong turns yet, you know what I mean? So,
of course there are.
But is there any advice you'd give to a younger Ian Priest?
One thing I said, I told you, one of my regrets was Branson. Well, take an opportunity. A bit of opportunism, right, is important, right? So you can overly think through with a very clever business plan, yes, but have the right sort of idea and the right ambition in mind. Go for it.
It's a good one. Because in that particular example, he probably would have, wouldn't he? Because he's probably more personality, and he'll get the idea dead quickly.
That's what I should have done.
Imagine that.
But I just went out. I went out a bit and go, I'm sure you'll want sort of some proper numbers, rather than my flaky numbers. But there you go. So, but no, I think going out of that's one thing that I suppose, going out of your comfort zone, it's easy saying it. It's quite hard doing. But don't forget, I've had lots of failures, things that have gone wrong, and you go, shit, am I any good at this? Or so just having that ability to keep going out that comfort zone. When you don't want to be miles out, right? That's when that's stupidity, I think. So that's when I went back to sort of launching that catering, McDonald's. Do I really understand? No. I was doing it with a partner who knew it more, but it's high risk, and I realised that McDonald's make a lot of their money through their retail estates rather than blah, 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 blah. Yeah. So I'm a bit naive. Now, in advertising, I sort of know a bit about it. Yeah. So that was outside of it. So launching my own was in my outside of my comfort zone, but not miles out like the catering business would have been. So I think that to me, and then as I say, then I think it is partners, finding the right people around you. Yeah. So that going back to talent, not only your equal partners, your founding partners, but the partnership thinking with talent. Yeah. And just giving more. Yeah. Just delegating, giving. Everyone's got a different way of doing it. Doesn't have to be the Ian Priest way, but as long as their mindset and values in the right place, just go and do it. Some things will go wrong, some things won't. So those would be my lessons learnt. Yeah, and I think you've said it, having that persistence, resilience, because things do go wrong. Yeah, I could name lots of things along that journey, which I haven't said so much today. But that where you take knocks and you've got to pick yourself up and go for it and have it is a sort of inner confidence without being arrogant, hopefully.
That is amazing. So thank you so much for sharing your journey with us and all those stories. That's really inspiring. A lot of that I didn't know. Obviously, some of it I knew something about, but I really appreciate it. And most of all, I appreciate you giving me my first break in this industry. If only you'd seen how, at one point, I thought I'm never going to get into this industry. But thank you for backing me, and that enabled us to have a great career at IMP, which we then took into Iris. So I owe you a lot. So thank you.
Pleasure, and thank you. And you haven't done bad.
So thank you for joining us on this episode of Entrepreneurs in the Wild. Download it wherever you get your podcasts from. Thank you.